the PJM Summer Outlook from Genscape 2014. So I'm Brian McIntosh, the Regional Director of the PJM team here, and along with me I have Diana Chiangwa, a Senior Analyst on the PJM team, and we're going to talk to you about some of the upcoming summer season and what we're seeing for some of the activity in the market. So the agenda we'll run through today. We'll first look back at the summer of 2013, give you some of the weather insights that we had, and talk to you about some of the more volatile days over the course of the summer. Then we'll get into this upcoming season. We'll go through our demand and weather forecasts. We'll look at some generation outages and provide some analysis around that subject. And then we'll talk to you about some transmission and congestion concerns that we have for the upcoming season. And then we'll wrap up with just talk about one market change, the new Myso Interface definition, and how we feel that that's going to impact the market going forward. And then we'll wrap up the presentation. If you have any questions over the course of the conversation, please feel free to submit them in the box to the lower right-hand corner. And just a reminder for anyone that hasn't been on one of these calls before, the slide deck along with the recording of the presentation will be emailed over to you either sometime later this afternoon or tomorrow morning. So some of the headlines that we take away for the upcoming season here. The first is that we're really looking at another seasonal summer ahead, and the volatility that we expect to see is primarily going to be demand driven. The second headline we note is there's still really a significant amount of generation currently offline to wrap up the month of May and heading into the summer period. And there's really only one major generation outage expected through the majority of the summer, and that's going to be your Salem 2 nuclear unit. The third headline is that there's really a lack of major planned transmission outages currently on the schedule, and we expect that a lot of load-driven constraints are what's going to drive the volatility, similar to what we saw last year. And the final headline is that the Myso interface definition is going to be changing, and that's scheduled for June 1st. So to look back at last summer, the first spot we want to start is with temperatures. What you can see is we really want to look at that green area. That's the majority of that there is going to be your PJM. We did see a slightly below normal conditions for the majority of PJM for most of the summer. And then portions of the mid-Atlantic, parts of Pennsylvania and New Jersey actually might have been slightly warmer when you looked at temperatures over the course of the 3-month period. For 2014, those cooler anomalies are still pretty much in place across the northern parts of PJM, and in mid-A in the south you may be seeing a little bit more seasonal conditions, but we're going to get into that in just a minute. In terms of the strongest days of last winter, they all fell within a 5-day period in mid-July. That July 15th through the 19th, those were our hottest days and our highest demand days, and they all were the ones that made up the 5 CP for the season. It's very common to see the middle of July being our peak demand, but typically there are 1 or 2 other days that might jump in there. So it was somewhat unique last summer to see that all the heat was centralized really only within a 1-day period. And the last thing we want to note is that 3 of these 5 days PJM instituted demand response. And one final piece on 5 CP. I know a number of the people on the call here are the PJM customers. The weekly and power buyer reports will now include a 5 CP forecast along with the service. So if that's something that you're interested in looking into some more and you aren't a weekly or a power buyer customer, please get in touch with us and we can look into getting you set up with that. In terms of pricing, it's pretty much as you'd expect. We did not see much volatility whatsoever through the majority of the summer. You can see the red line here is showing you the summer of 2013. Your blue line is showing your 5-year average. And then we put the summer of 2008 here as well, just to show you what a really volatile summer looked like. So as you can see, other than that week in mid-July, we didn't have much action whatsoever. Most days were clearing at $50 or below. So you can see, looking at the days in July, we had all the days except for one cleared over $114 or $100. The day ahead in the middle portion of the week started to catch up and kind of figure it out, and we were able to clear the day ahead either well above or at least in line with where the real time ended up settling. But you can see that having all those demand days over 150 gigs was significantly above the rest of the summer, where demand was, it averaged about 117.9. So big difference between that week and the rest of the summer. So getting into this coming summer, as I mentioned before, the outlook in terms of weather forecast that we're predicting is not that much different from last year. We're expecting a lot of below normal or slightly below normal conditions in your PJM West and ComEd region. And then as you get into the Mid-Atlantic and PJM South, you're seeing temperatures that are just around normal, maybe slightly above in the South. Now, the other piece that we look at when we're forecasting is where are the risks associated with our forecast. And talking to our meteorologists, they feel that the summer forecast that we've put out, the risk is really to the downside still, even though we're slightly below average. There's a higher probability that we'll be below normal as opposed to seasonal or above normal. The consensus for this forecast is pretty mixed. It seems like the majority feel that a cooler than average temperature in and around the Great Lakes is pretty consistent across the board. It's really where the East Coast is that there's a little bit more uncertainty how far that below normal condition spreads to the east and how much just normal seasonal conditions are expected. But overall, I think the takeaway you should have from the forecast is, looking at the season as a whole, we're seeing likely slightly below normal conditions. Now, when we break that down a little bit more month by month, you can see the left-hand charts are showing you June, July, August. In June, you're seeing actually slightly above normal conditions for parts of Chicago or of the ComEd and the West, and then actually below normal for your South and parts of the Mid-Atlantic. So I think we're already starting to feel that a little bit. We've been seeing a good amount of heat in ComEd in the West through a good portion of May, and it seems like that trend may stick around through June. As we get into July and August, that trend starts to shift, and you see more below normal conditions in ComEd and the West, and then the normal conditions through the rest of PJM. Now, for this graph, for this chart, what you're looking at is the major cities within PJM, and we looked at the last 30 years and where the peak temperatures and demand ended up coming in for each region. So, as expected, the peak summer days typically fall right in that mid-July time frame, whether you're out in Chicago or you're all the way to the east in Richmond and Baltimore. So you can kind of use this chart to kind of get a feel for, okay, Cincinnati tends to be maybe the earliest area over the last 30 years to hit their high, whereas an area like Philadelphia tends to be on the further end of the spectrum, where they tend to have their high demand days a little bit further toward the back half. We also show since 2007 which days of the year you saw your peak demand and where they fell by the different subregions. Let's talk about generation a little bit. As I mentioned in the headlines, your really only major outage to think about is going to be Salem. It started in mid-April and then goes through August of this coming season. I think the things to note with Salem is it was scheduled to end in May. It's been extended out through August. When you have a generator that big, I don't know if it'll necessarily cause any sort of major congestion risk. There's plenty of generation in and around the area to meet those needs. But when you do get some of these hot summer days, whether it's in DPL or southern Jersey, I think that's when you're going to start to feel the shortfall of not having the Salem nuke. And the other thing to think about with that is we're already starting the summer with Salem out. When there are going to be unplanned outages in the region, that's this is your backbone, and then you need to think about if you lose other major units in the area over the course of the season, how is that going to impact price? Because you're already starting a little bit behind the game. I'm going to turn it over to Diana, and she's going to talk to you a little bit more about the remaining generation outages.
All right, so similar to most summers, we don't really have a lot of scheduled generation for the majority of the summer. But what we do have is most of the outages that are currently ongoing, we have those generators coming back only in that first to second week of June. So just with June expected to be normal to slightly above normal in terms of demand, those first couple of weeks in June do pose a risk, especially since we have some pretty big generators that are still out of service. So these generators include, we have the Amos, which is a big coal unit over in West Virginia, 1.3 gigawatts. Another one is Rockport, pretty similar location there, another 1.3 gigawatts. And in terms of nuclear, we do have Surrey. And these are all expected to be back in service around June 6 to June 9. And again, as is with most of these scheduled outages, we may actually find these not returning as per schedule, and that's really where the risk is. And if there are any deviations on the schedule, especially with what we're seeing with Salem right now, we may actually see some elevated pricing during those first couple of weeks in June. And then moving on to congestion analysis. The first thing that I think comes to most people's minds when thinking about about last summer is definitely ATISI during that week of July 15 to 19 last year. So just to go over what exactly transpired during that week, we highlight ATISI zone and the ATISI interface, which was instituted by PJM during that week. They pretty much created that interface with the conditions that were ongoing that time. So we had PJM say that the reasons they had to implement this ATISI interface were these three. First off was the South Canton transformer. So this last year had a much weaker, a much lower rating. So it was around 1,800 during emergency conditions, around 95 degrees, which is around the same temperature that we had during that week of July 15. So what we do know about this when we start to think about this year is that they have upgraded the equipment there. So South Canton now has 2,400 megawatts of rating during emergency situations. So this we do expect will mitigate the need to institute an ATISI interface. Other reasons they also cited for having driven this congestion include just a generally really high load that we had during that week. We had a peak of 158 gigawatts on July 18, and that corresponded to 13.9 gigawatts, 13.9 gigawatts in ATISI on the same day. So again, with the similar conditions that we're expecting year to year, this is not really something that we can comment on. It will likely still be the case. and also there were 2,700 megawatts of unplanned generation in and around that ATISI area during that time. And again, this is not something that we really can comment on regarding this year. We could have a similar situation. The main mitigating factor there would really be the South Canton upgrade to a higher limit during emergency situations. And then, of course, there was demand response that was implemented as well during this week. Most of this was concentrated in ATISI. We had this on three consecutive days, 650 and above, 600 megawatts and above during that week. And again, we definitely think that with the load being pretty similar to what we had yesterday, this is something that we could also see happen this year. And then here we're going to go through some historical load-driven constraints that we've also seen in other zones. And the main thing to just keep in mind here is that the data that we're using is all in respect to 2013. So we're just really saying what the load was when we saw these constraints last year, and also in what hours did we mainly see them appear. So in Dominion, one of the main constraints that we saw most of the summer was the Cloverdale 765 kV transformer. It gives a really big upside to Dominion as well as the West Hub. And we did see this pretty much throughout the off-peak, starting around hour ending 22 and into the morning ending around hour ending 9. So the main driver again here is just the Bath County JETA plant pumping overnight and increasing the load in Dominion. We did see a minimum trigger load of around 9 gigawatts during that off-peak. Just when we sort out the demand that we did see when the Cloverdale transformer was in place. And then other constraints that we saw include the Moseley Roanoke as well as the Rocky Mountain to Brattleboro, and these were mostly in the afternoon. Again, strong upside for Dominion and downside for the AG and the NIHubs as well. Hours ending 11 to 21 during that peak afternoon into the evening is when, again, we saw most of this. And on the day, we're just showing a picture depicting what the impact is when we have Moseley to Roanoke being the main constraint that is impacting PJM. Then moving on to the next zone, we have DPL. Another zone that is pretty critical. We see a lot of congestion in DPL. Last summer, what we did see was the Ocean Pines to Worcester on the 69 kV level, and this gives a pretty isolated impact to DPL, really strong upside, which also translates into upside for the East Hub. The hours where we saw this were in the afternoon into the evening as well, so hour ending 13 to around hour ending 21 with the minimum load around 3.2 gigawatts. So again, with a pretty similar load profile expected for this summer, this is something that we may see. There are some things that we should keep in mind when we compare this summer to last summer as well. The main thing would be that the Indian River, we have one of the units there that retired in December, 136 megawatts there. So basically, we do have less generation in DPL this year, and that may just overall make it more susceptible to seeing this really bullish congestion, as they rely more on outside generation coming in from the north around Keeney, and also from the very south, DPL south, with units such as Chesapeake at the bottom. And then also, there will be some outages during the summer, very short-term intraday outages especially, and these will likely have some impact on DPL, such as the outages we have on the Indian River to Piney Grove and the New Church to Oak Hole. So again, while we have this overall strong, when we have, on days that we have a strong load, we'll see strong DPL congestion. We also have some localized congestion that we may also see when we have these outages. And then here we just try to highlight just overall throughout PJM what are the areas that we may also see some really strong congestion driven by a load. I would just highlight here the AP South and the FedBLA or the BC-PEP interface. This is a constraint that we pretty assured to see when we have high load in the east, just with the really strong west to east flows. And to note here is the Monsoon to Dubs line that is returning on June 1st. So without this line, there are less flows going to the east, but getting it back does put more pressure on does increase the capacity for the AP South to send power to the BGE and PEPCO areas. So this line is coming back, and we expect that it might be the last time it actually goes on outage. The work that has been ongoing there every year is expected to be completed this year, and this might be the last time we see that outage. And then, yeah, just looking at the hours again, this is a constraint we see throughout most of the day. And then for the Salem nuke being out of service this summer, we did highlight some pressure just around that 500 kV level going into PSAG and PPL. So we may see some West Coastville transformer or the 500X interface, which constraints that we usually see when there's a strong pull over in the eastern side of PJM. So yeah, and then also highlight some other constraints that we've seen, like the Begley-Grayson, which is a pretty big constraint impacting BGE when they are undercommitted due to strong load in the zone. And then here we have listed some outage-driven constraints that are to be expected in June. Like Brian already said, we are not anticipating a lot of transmission outages this summer, but there are a few, mainly 5-day, 6-day outages that we can definitely highlight. In June, we have an outage on the Manatee Safe Harbor 230 kV line in BGE, and when on the PPL BGE border. And when we have this line out, we usually see congestion around the Grayson to Safe Harbor, which drive BGE and the West Hub up as well. And moving on to July, not really a lot of outages in July, so not really anticipating much here. The main pocket that we're expecting to be a risk is in PEPCO, just around Choke Point and Buzzard Ritchie, as we have a lot of outages around the Palmers and the Blue Plains stations. And then finally in August, a few outages as well that are quite concerning, but again, here I would highlight the North Anna transformer, which is out for most of August, and in the past we've seen this drive some congestion on the North Anna transformer, which does drive up PEPCO as well as the West Hub. So I think this is all I think is some of the highlights we have for congestion. I'm going to move over to Brian, who's going to talk about the market changes. Great.
Thanks, Diana. And I think that, yeah, Diana highlighted a ton of really good outages, and kind of when we were going through everything, I think the kind of big things that we took away is, yeah, there's a lot of short-term outages. I think we listed a lot of good ones that are going to drive some price separation. I think the key is to use the ones we've listed kind of as a benchmark. During the summertime, there's a lot of things that come in and come out, and especially, you know, if that, I think one of the ones we highlighted in July, those PEPCO outages, I would feel high level of confidence if it's going to be 95 degrees in PEPCO that week. I would say there's, you know, high chance that those lines are going to get delayed, or those outages are going to get delayed. So I think the outages we listed are really good, but I think we want to make sure that we let you know that it's important to keep checking on those, because PJM will move them around quite a bit. The last thing we want to talk about is just the change to the Myso interface definition. As of June 1st, the PJM will implement a new Myso interface definition. Currently, the definition really is made up of 10 points in Myso that PJM uses to calculate the Myso interface. In a couple weeks here, they're going to move to a new interface that factors in 5 Myso nodes and 5 PJM nodes. What you have on the left here is showing you the current setup and on the right is your new interface. This map is it's a little bit tough to see. If you Google it on the PJM website, you can get the PowerPoint presentation that will give you this this chart or this map in a little bit more detail, and you might be able to see a little better. But basically, what you're looking at, these are the new points that are making up the Myso interface. The red are your Myso points. The green are your PJM points. I think the important thing to note here is you can see that in the kind of darker blue in the middle there, you're seeing up to the top Michigan City and Schaefer. They've taken out the Dune Acres point, and it almost seems like they've substituted all the way on the left that red point, the Beaver Channel. So when I think about how that impacts PJM, when you have congestion on the points that are moving power from ComEd into NIPSCO and into AEP, your Crete St. John's, your Hedgewish to Wildwoods, your kind of 345 lines there. When those typically give upside to NIPSCO, you'd see some potential upside on the Myso interface, or at least you get 3 Myso interface points that get upside, whereas now Beaver Channel's on the other side of it, and you may get a little bit more downside there. Same thing goes with adding Cayuga in there with like a Monticello to East Winnemac. That would get further downside. And so I think what you're ending up seeing is it's definitely spread out better. You now have some more balance in terms of PJM versus Myso generation. But I think a few of the takeaways that I took from looking at this map is you are taking a little bit out of NIPSCO, moving it to the other side of ComEd, and also adding that Cayuga that could put some downside on Monticello. So what we ended up doing is we took last summer and we took the old Myso interface price in these different products, the day ahead, real time, 1 through 24 for all 7 days of the week. We looked at the day ahead on peak, the real time on peak, the day ahead off peak, and the real time off peak. And we took the old Myso interface definition, and then we also took those 10 new points, priced them out. They're all weighted equally going forward. So we did a comparison to how the pricing would have come in last summer versus this summer. And one thing that we noted is, despite adding some of those nodes within PJM, it looks like the new Myso interface pricing is actually a little bit less than what we would have seen last summer if you had the exact same conditions, the same constraints, the same overall setup, which we know it'll never be complete apples to apples coming forward. But we did use a 3-month sample size, so we thought that this information was good to pass along. If you have any questions and you want to talk more about it, we're more than happy to set up some calls and we can go over some details. But I think on June 1st, this is definitely something we're going to be watching pretty closely over that first month and seeing how things go. So just to wrap things up for everyone, the kind of 4 main takeaways that we have here are, I think that the first is from a demand standpoint. The forecast feels pretty similar to last year. Pretty relatively mild summer is what we're expecting to see, with kind of some pockets of heat in the east that may drive things up. So it's not to say we're not going to have a volatile summer, but it does seem like, just from a pure demand standpoint, when you look at the whole summer, it doesn't look like it's going to be an overly hot one. From the supply side, there's a lot of generators that are still offline. Diana went through that list of 5 or 6 generators that make up 6+ gigs of generation that need to return over the next few weeks here. We'll be watching those and tracking them, how they respond. But other than those kind of big ones, once they come back through the early to mid portion of June, I think we're going to be pretty healthy there as we get into the late June, early July period. The third takeaway on the transmission side, I think one of the big ones is that ATISI volatility we saw last summer. PJM has made some upgrades there to South Canton, and that should mitigate some of the risk. Now, I think we want to take that a little bit with a grain of salt because there's still a lot of generation that has been retired in ATISI, and there's definitely still some outages on the schedule that can make that a sensitive region. I think the important takeaway here is that they've made some changes, and they seem to be better situated, at least in the South Canton point, to limit the type of event that happened last year. There's definitely still some sensitivity in ATISI, I think due to some generation that's come offline. If you get any sort of unplanned outages there in kind of northwest Pennsylvania or northern Ohio, I think that area gets pretty sensitive, especially on a hot day. And then lastly, and we think demand response is going to keep playing a key role in managing these peak days. I think ATISI was an example of how PJM plans to use demand response going forward, and I think that's something that as we get into some of those high 140 demand days, 150 demand days, that we expect PJM to implement a good amount of demand response to kind of keep the lid on things a little bit. But that's the majority of our presentation. If anyone has any questions, they can. I think we have a couple that have been typed in over the course of the presentation. But just a reminder, if anyone wants to discuss this in more detail, my contact information as well as Diana's right here at the end of the presentation, and we're more than happy to talk about any of the points that we made in the slide deck here. So Dan, we had a couple questions, I think.
Yes. So the first question was, can you explain what the 5CP is?
Right. So the 5CP is what PJM uses to on the 5 highest demand days during the summer period. Those are the days where if you're a load serving entity, there may be additional penalties that are put in if you're short at all in terms of your imbalances. So what a lot of people on the load side will look at is they try to predict what the 5 highest demand days of the summer are going to be. Last summer it was pretty easy because it just kind of naturally went, Tuesday through Friday or Tuesday through Saturday. But I think one thing that we're looking to do this year is really get an understanding of what the likelihood of the day being the highest demand day. Now, load serving entities can definitely use that for some value, but I also think everybody else, there's quite a bit of value in understanding how high a risk the day is of being the hottest or highest demand day of the summer, because clearly that should indicate either the highest price day or one of the highest price days of the season. So again, that forecast is currently it's available to our weekly and power buyer customers, and if you want to get a look at it, we're more than happy to talk to you about that longer term demand forecast.
The next question would be, how are you expecting gas prices to impact the summer?
You want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, just looking at the demand levels that we have for the summer, they seem to be pretty much in line with what we saw last summer. So not really expecting too much of a deviation in prices between the summer and last summer in terms of gas prices. And looking at the other regions, New England as well as New York, demand for them is also pretty similar to last year, even below that. So overall, just not expecting this to strain the gas prices. So pretty similar to last year.
And you looked at July, right? And you saw, what did we see there? During that week in July, the gas prices today.
So the gas prices, when you look at that week, were not really part of what was really driving that the volatility.
Right. Yeah. So I think the important thing to note is kind of during that week in July, it wasn't really gas sensitivities that drove the volume as much as just demand and demand response and just some emergency procedures as opposed to fuel pricing. So I would say that's probably going to be the case going forward. Sorry to put you on the spot.
All right. No, I think the last question you might have already touched on regarding the Hatfield Ferry and the Mitchell retirements that we did see last year.
Yeah. So I think we do have some retirements in kind of that Ohio and West Virginia corridor that do make things a little bit more sensitive. I think unless we get some really big heat wave, I do expect PJM should be pretty well set up to handle that. But I would say, if that demand does start to hit that kind of Ohio ComEd corridor and down into West Virginia, that there's definitely some retirements that might impact some upside volatility.
I think that's all the questions we have.
Great. Well, thanks everybody for hopping on the call. I know PJM's been pretty crazy the last 24 hours, so I appreciate everyone taking the time out of their day. And keep an eye out in your emails. We'll send this slide deck over along with a recording of the presentation. And feel free to get in touch if you have any other questions. But thank you very much.